3 people, 1 Michelin-star restaurant, and a secret that is about to cost billions. You think you know how this ends? You don't. Because tonight, we aren't just talking about a cheating scandal. We are talking about a calculated demolition of a dynasty. Darian thought he was the hunter. Selina thought she was the prize. But Camilla, the woman 8 months pregnant, sitting 3 tables away, she wasn't just the victim. She was the architect. Buckle up. This is the story of the night the Hayes Empire crumbled over a plate of white truffle risotto. The rain in Manhattan didn't fall. It was orchestrated, slicking the streets of the Upper East Side until they looked like black mirrors. Darian Hayes checked his reflection in the tinted window of the Maybach before the valet opened the door. At 42, Darian was the kind of man who wore power like a second skin. He was the CEO of Hayes Hollister, a private equity firm that had recently swallowed 3 mid-sized tech companies for breakfast. He adjusted his cufflink platinum, engraved with the family crest, and turned to the woman beside him. "Wait 30 seconds after I get out," Darian said, his voice low. "The paparazzi are aggressive tonight." Selina Valenti pouted a gesture she had perfected during her brief stint as a runway model in Milan. She was 24, devastatingly beautiful, and entirely aware of the transaction taking place. She wore a dress that cost more than most people's cars, a shimmering slip of emerald silk that clung to her like a secret. "I hate waiting, Dar," she whispered, leaning in to brush a kiss against his jaw. "It makes me feel like a dirty little secret." "You're not a secret, Selina. You're a complexity," Darian lied smoothly. He stepped out into the flashing bulbs, his face a mask of bored indifference. He didn't stop for questions. He walked straight toward the heavy oak doors of Lobsidian, the most exclusive French restaurant in New York City. Lobsidian was the kind of place where the menu had no prices, and the lighting was dim enough to hide sins, but bright enough to show off diamonds. The maitre d', a man named Laurent, who knew every scandal in the city before it hit page 6, stiffened slightly as Darian entered. "Monsieur Hayes," Laurent said, his French accent thick but precise. "Always an honor. Your usual table in the alcove is ready." "Is it private?" Darian asked, scanning the room. "The most private we have, monsieur." Darian nodded and slipped a $100 bill into Laurent's hand, not as a tip, but as a reminder. He sat down, facing the door. A minute later, Selina glided in. She didn't look at Laurent. She didn't look at the other diners. She walked with the confidence of a woman who knew she was the most expensive thing in the room. As she slid into the booth opposite Darian, hidden partially by a velvet curtain and a towering arrangement of white orchids, the tension in Darian's shoulders relaxed. "Safe," he muttered, picking up the wine list. "You worry too much," Selina said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Her nails were painted a deep blood red. "Camilla is at that charity gala in the Hamptons, isn't she? The one for... what is it? Saving the whales. Saving the historical libraries." Darian corrected his voice, tightening at the mention of his wife. "And yes, she's 3 hours away. She texted me an hour ago complaining about the humidity ruining her hair." "Good." Selina smiled, a shark-like glint in her eyes. "Then stop looking at the door, Dar. Tonight is about us. You promised me we'd discuss the apartment in Paris." Darian sighed. He had promised. He had promised a lot of things. But as he looked at Selina, he felt that familiar rush of adrenaline, the thrill of the forbidden. It was a drug. What Darian didn't know, as he ordered a bottle of 1982 Chateau Margaux, was that the text message he received from Camilla an hour ago hadn't been sent from the Hamptons. It had been sent from a black SUV parked across the street. Camilla Hayes felt the baby kick a sharp, insistent thud against her ribs. She winced, placing a hand over her swollen stomach. 8 months. She felt like a whale beached on the high thread count sheets of her life. She sat in the back of the Escalade, the air conditioning blasting against the heat of her rage. Camilla was not the trophy wife the tabloids painted her to be. She was a Vanderbilt on her mother's side, and her father had been a ruthless litigator for the mob before he went legitimate. She had Stanford law credentials she hadn't used in 10 years, but she hadn't forgotten how to build a case. Mrs. Hayes, the driver, a burly ex-Marine named Hobbs, asked softly. "We've been sitting here for 20 minutes. Do you want me to drive you back to the penthouse?" Camilla looked at her phone. The tracking dot on Darian's phone, a feature he thought he had disabled months ago, was blinking steadily inside Lobsidian. "No, Hobbs," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'm hungry." She adjusted her dress. It was a navy blue maternity gown, elegant and severe. She wasn't wearing the family diamonds tonight. She was wearing pearls, tear-shaped and cold against her skin. She opened her clutch and checked the contents one last time. A tube of lipstick, her credit card, the black card, attached to the joint account, and a brown envelope containing photographs taken by a private investigator named Reynolds. "Help me out, Hobbs," she said. The driver opened the door, and Camilla stepped onto the wet pavement. The humidity hit her, frizzing, the hair she had spent an hour straightening, but she didn't care. The paparazzi had mostly dispersed after Darian's entrance, chasing a pop star who had just arrived down the block. Camilla walked toward the restaurant. She felt heavy, tired, and heartbroken. But beneath the heartbreak was something harder. Calcified anger. She had known about Selena for 3 months. She knew about the business trips to Dubai. She knew about the diamond bracelet Darian claimed was a tax write-off. She had stayed sunt, playing the part of the glowing, oblivious, pregnant wife, waiting for the perfect moment. Tonight wasn't just a date for Darian. Tonight was the night Camilla's forensic accountant had confirmed that Darian was moving assets into offshore accounts, preparing for a divorce he hadn't announced yet. He was planning to leave her with nothing but the baby and the house in Connecticut. He underestimated her. Camilla pushed open the heavy doors of Lobsidian. Laurent, the maitre d', looked up from his reservation book. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he was about to faint. He dropped his pen. "Madame Hayes," he stammered, stepping out from behind the podium, as if to physically block her path. We weren't expecting you. I thought." "The Hamptons. Change of plans, Laurent." Camilla smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It didn't reach her eyes. The humidity was dreadful, and I realized I was craving the lobster thermidor. You know, it's the only thing that settles the baby. Laurent was sweating. He glanced nervously toward the alcove where Darian and Selena were currently clinking glasses. "Madame, I am so sorry." Laurent lied, his voice pitching high. "We are fully booked. Not a single table. Perhaps I can order you a car to Per Se. I will call personally." "Fully booked." Camilla raised an eyebrow. She looked around the dining room. It was busy, yes, but not full. There was a prominent round table in the center of the room, currently empty. "What about that one? That is reserved for the mayor," Laurent improvised desperately. "I don't see the mayor, Laurent, and I am a shareholder in the holding company that owns this building." Camilla said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "If I don't get a table in the next 30 seconds, I will have the health inspector here by dessert to check the temperature of your scallops." Laurent swallowed hard. He was trapped. If he seated her, it was a disaster. If he refused her, it was professional suicide. "Right this way, madame," Laurent whispered, defeated. He grabbed a menu, his hands shaking. He couldn't seat her in the alcove that would be immediate death. He had to put her somewhere far away. But the only open table was the one she pointed out, the center table, the one with a direct line of sight to the velvet curtain of the alcove. Camilla walked through the dining room. Heads turned. Everyone knew Camilla Hayes. They knew her pregnancy was high risk. They knew she was supposed to be on bed rest. She sat down at the center table. She was positioned perfectly. If Darian leaned forward, she wouldn't see him. But if he leaned back, if he laughed, if he stood up to go to the restroom, she would have a front row seat. "Sparkling water, Laurent," Camilla said, placing her clutch on the table. "And don't tell my husband I'm here. I want to surprise him." Laurent nodded weakly and scurried away looking like a man walking to the gallows. Darian poured the wine. The liquid was dark, rich, and cost more than the average American's mortgage payment. Selina watched him, her eyes tracing the line of his expensive suit. "So," Selina purred, running her foot up his calf under the table. "Tell me about the portfolio. You said you were moving the liquid assets." Darian took a sip, savoring the oaky finish. "It's done. The shell company in the Caymans is active. By the time Camilla's lawyers even think to subpoena the accounts, the money will be ghosted. It'll look like bad investments. Hayes Hollister took a hit. Sad, really." "You're wicked," Selina giggled. "Will she have enough to raise the baby? She has her family trust." Darian waved his hand dismissively. "She won't starve, but she won't be living in the penthouse on 5th. That's for us." He smiled at her, but his phone buzzed on the table. He frowned. A text from Laurent. "Message. Emergency. Kitchen fire. Ventilation issue. Please remain seated. Do not stand up." Darian frowned. "Weird. What is it?" Selina asked. "The maitre d' says there's a kitchen issue. Tells me to stay seated." Darian shrugged. "Probably doesn't want me to see the chaos." Scene shifts to the main dining room. Camilla took a sip of her sparkling water. Her senses were dialed up to 11. She scanned the room. She saw the nervous glances of the waiters. She saw Laurent hovering near the alcove, looking like he was having a stroke. She knew exactly where they were. A waiter approached her table with a basket of bread. He was young, new, and clearly hadn't been briefed on the nuclear situation unfolding in the dining room. "Good evening, Madame Hayes," the boy chirped. "The chef sends his regards, and he wanted to know if you would be joining Mr. Hayes's table later for dessert, or if you are dining separately." Time stopped. The clinking of silverware seemed to vanish. The low hum of jazz music faded. Camilla looked at the boy. His smile was innocent. He had just handed her the smoking gun. "Mr. Hayes is here," Camilla asked, feigning shock. Her hand went to her chest. "My husband!" The boy's smile faltered. He realized too late the silence of the other waiters, staring at him in horror. I thought I saw him in the alcove. I assumed. Oh, wonderful." Camilla clapped her hands together, a sound that echoed sharply. "He told me he was stuck in a board meeting. He must have finished early and wanted to surprise me." She started to push her chair back. Laurent materialized out of thin air, practically tackling the table. "Madame, no." Laurent gasped. "The boy is mistaken. It is another Hayes, a cousin from London." Camilla paused halfway out of her chair. She looked Laurent dead in the eye. I didn't know Darian had a cousin in London, Laurent, especially one who orders the 1982 Margot. I can smell it from here. It is a very popular vintage, Laurent squeaked. Sit down, Laurent, Camilla commanded. She settled back into her chair. If it's a cousin, I wouldn't want to intrude. But tell me, is this cousin dining alone? Laurent looked at the bread boy, silently wishing him into a black hole. He is with a business associate, a consultant. A consultant, Camilla repeated. She picked up a breadstick and snapped it in half. The sound was like a gunshot. Male or female? Laurent closed his eyes. Female. An interior designer. For the new office. Interior design at 9:00 p.m. on a Friday, Camilla mused. How dedicated. Well, I'll just sit here and eat my dinner. I wouldn't want to interrupt business. She picked up her phone and opened a specific app. It controlled the Bluetooth speakers in the Hayes penthouse, but it also had a connection to Darian's smartwatch, a feature they used to share heart rates during workouts. She sent a nudge to his watch. Scene shifts to the alcove. Darian's wrist buzzed aggressively. He looked down. A bright red heart icon was pulsing on his watch face. Breathe. Relax. Breathe. What is that? Selina asked, annoyed by the distraction. It's Camilla's app, Darian muttered, confused. She's sending me a heartbeat. She must be checking if I'm working out. Ignore it, Selina snapped. Order the soufflé. I have to go to the bathroom, Darian said, standing up. Does sit down, Selina said. Selina. Laurent said. I don't care what Laurent said. I'm paying the bill. I can pee when I want. Darian stood up, adjusting his jacket. He stepped out from behind the velvet curtain. He took 2 steps into the main dining room. And then he froze. 30 feet away, framed perfectly by the ambient lighting, sat his pregnant wife. She wasn't looking at the menu. She was looking directly at him. She held a glass of water in one hand, and with the other, she gave him a small, terrifying little wave. Mouthed, Hi, honey. Darian's blood ran cold. He physically stumbled back, nearly knocking over a waiter carrying a tray of escargot. He ducked back behind the curtain so fast he looked like a cartoon character. What is it? Selina asked, alarmed by his pale face. Did you see a photographer? Worse, Darian hissed, grabbing his napkin and wiping sweat from his forehead. Camilla, she's here. What? Selina's eyes went wide. Here, in the restaurant. She's at the center table. She saw me. Oh my God. Selina grabbed her purse. I have to leave. I can't be seen with you. My modeling contract has a morality clause. Dar. If I'm caught as the mistress of a man with a pregnant wife, I lose the Gucci campaign. Sit down, Darian hissed. If you run, you look guilty. If we stay, maybe I can spin this. Spin this. Selina laughed hysterically. She's right there. What are you going to say? That I'm your accountant? Yes, Darian snapped. Exactly. You're my accountant. We are discussing the tax audit. I'm wearing a backless silk dress and emeralds. Darian accountants don't dress like this. Italian accountants do. Darian was grasping at straws. Outside the curtain, the footsteps were approaching. Slow, deliberate. The click-clack of expensive heels on marble. Click, click, click. They stopped right outside the curtain. A hand manicured and wearing a simple wedding band reached out and grasped the velvet fabric. Darian. Camilla's voice sang out, sweet as poison. Are you in there? Laurent said you were having a meeting with a designer, but I could have sworn I just saw you turn as pale as a ghost. Is everything all right?" Darian looked at Selina. Selina looked at the kitchen exit, measuring the distance for a sprint. Darian cleared his throat. "Camilla, darling. What a surprise." Camilla ripped the curtain back. The exposure was absolute. The light from the dining room flooded the intimate booth. Camilla stood there, one hand on her belly, the other resting on her hip. She looked from Darian, who was sweating through his Egyptian cotton shirt, to Selina, who was trying to cover her cleavage with a napkin. Camilla didn't scream. She didn't cry. She smiled. "Oh, hello," she said, looking at Selina. "You must be the interior designer. Though judging by the dress, I assume we're redecorating the bedroom." Selina Valenti had been trained to walk in 6-inch heels on a moving runway, but she had no training for this. She sat frozen, her hand hovering over her wine glass, her knuckles turning white. Darian, to his credit, recovered with the sociopathic speed of a man who had lied to shareholders for a living. He stood up, forcing a smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. "Camilla," he said, his voice dropping an octave to simulate intimacy. "You're hysterical. It's the hormones. This is Miss Valenti. She is consulting on the artwork for the new lobby. We were just discussing the textures." "Textures," Camilla repeated, sliding into the booth next to Darian. She sat so close her thigh pressed against his. She felt him flinch. "Well, she certainly has a lot of texture exposed. It's brave. I haven't worn a backless dress since the 3rd trimester began. You're lucky, Miss Valenti. Enjoy your waistline while it's still your main asset." Camilla waved a hand at the hovering waiter, the same terrified boy from before. "Waiter," she called out, "we'll need another setting, and bring me the menu. I'm famished. Darian, pour me some water, would you?" "My hands are swelling." Darian sat down, defeated. He poured the water, his hand shaking so badly, a few drops splashed onto the pristine tablecloth. "Camilla, we were just finishing up," Darian said through gritted teeth. "Selina has a flight to catch." "Oh, nonsense." Camilla smiled, opening the leather-bound menu. "The airport is a nightmare in this rain. Besides, I haven't seen you all day. We should celebrate, Miss Valenti. You'll stay, won't you? I'd love to hear about your artistic vision." Selina looked at Darian, pleading with her eyes for an exit strategy, but Darian was paralyzed. If he caused a scene now, with half the Upper East Side watching the divorce, wouldn't just be expensive, it would be a public execution. I can stay for a moment," Selina whispered, her voice trembling. "Excellent." Camilla beamed. She turned to the waiter. "I'll have the lobster thermidor, and for the table, bring the oysters Rockefeller. Darian loves oysters. He thinks they're an aphrodisiac, though lately he's been so tired at home, I'm not sure they're working." "Right, darling." The silence at the table was heavy enough to crush a diamond. For the next 45 minutes, Camilla Hayes put on a masterclass in psychological warfare. She ate her lobster with gusto, while Darian and Selina picked at their food like prisoners on death row. "So, Selina," Camilla said, wiping butter from her lip with a linen napkin, "where did you study art, the Sorbonne Pratt? Or perhaps you're self-taught?" I modeled in Milan," Selina stammered. "I have an eye for aesthetics." "Ah, a model." Camilla nodded, as if solving a difficult equation. "That explains the posture, and the hungry look. It's a tough industry, isn't it? My father represented a few agencies back in the day. The contracts are brutal, especially the morality clauses." Selina dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Morality clauses, Selina squeaked. Oh, yes. Camilla took a sip of water. Big brands, Gucci, Chanel, Prada, they hate scandal. If a face of their brand is caught, say, breaking up a marriage involving a high-risk pregnancy, they drop them faster than last season's hemlines, usually with a lawsuit for breach of character. Camilla paused, looking Selina dead in the eye. But you don't have to worry about that, do you? Since you're just here for the art. Selina went pale. She looked at Darian. Is that true? Darian glared at his wife. Camilla, stop it. You're scaring her. I'm just making conversation, darling, Camilla said innocently. By the way, Darian, did you transfer the funds for the nursery renovation? The contractor called me today. Said the check bounced. Darian stiffened. It didn't bounce. It's a banking error. I moved some capital around. I told you this morning. Right. The capital movement, Camilla said. She reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. Funny thing about capital, it leaves a trail, like breadcrumbs or cheap perfume. She placed the phone on the table face up. It wasn't the banking app. It was a photo of Darian and Selina boarding a private jet 3 weeks ago. The tail number was visible. This was the business trip to Chicago, wasn't it? Camilla asked. Strange. That plane is registered to fly to St. Bart's. Did the pilot get lost, Darian? Darian slammed his hand on the table. The glasses jumped. Enough, he hissed. Camilla, we are leaving. Now. We will discuss this at home. I'm not going home with you, Darian. Camilla said, her voice suddenly devoid of all warmth. The playful wife mask dropped, revealing the cold steel of the lawyer beneath. And neither are you. What are you talking about? I changed the locks an hour ago, Camilla said calmly. And I instructed the doorman that Mr. Hayes is no longer a resident. Your bags are currently with the concierge. Well, the bags I packed for you. I think I included mostly gym clothes. You'll need them where you're going. You can't kick me out of my own house, Darian roared, forgetting the whisper. Heads turned across the restaurant. I bought that penthouse. Actually, Camilla corrected him. The trust bought the penthouse. My trust. You just pay the maintenance fees, which, judging by what I found this morning, you won't be able to do for much longer. Darian's eyes narrowed. What did you find? Camilla smiled. It was the smile of the executioner raising the axe. Let's pay the bill first, shall we? I wouldn't want to dine and dash. Laurent, she snapped her fingers. Laurent arrived with the leather folder containing the bill. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth, possibly a war zone, rather than at table 4. The check, Monsieur Hayes, Laurent whispered. The bill was astronomical. The vintage wine, the truffles, the caviar service Darian had ordered to impress Selina before the nightmare began. It came to $14,500. Darian snatched the folder. He wanted to end this. He wanted to get outside, call his lawyer, and do damage control. He pulled out his black Amex, the Centurion card made of titanium, the card that had no limit, the card that symbolized his godhood in this city. He threw it onto the tray. Add 20%. Just get me out of here. Laurent took the card and walked to the terminal station near the wall. Camilla watched. She didn't move. She just watched Laurent's back. A moment later, Laurent frowned. He swiped the card again. He typed something in manually. He shook his head. He picked up the phone to call the merchant authorization line. Darian tapped his foot impatiently. What is the hold-up? Laurent returned to the table. He held the card with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. Monsieur Hayes, Laurent said softly. I am afraid The card has been declined. Declined? Darian laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Don't be an idiot, Laurent. That card has a $5 million ceiling. Run it again. I ran it 3 times, monsieur. The code is do not honor. It means the account has been frozen by the issuer. That's impossible. Darian stood up, his face flushing red. Here. He threw a platinum visa on the table. Use the corporate card. Laurent took it. He walked back. He returned 30 seconds later. Also declined, monsieur. Lost or stolen status. Darian felt the room spinning. Selina, he snapped. Give him your card. I'll wire you the money in the morning. Selina looked at the bill. $14,000. She looked at Darian. I have a limit of 5,000, Dar. You know that. You pay for everything. Darian turned to Camilla. She was calmly eating the last bite of her lobster. You. Darian pointed a shaking finger at her. What did you do? Me. Camilla wiped her mouth. I didn't do anything to your cards, darling. But do you remember that power of attorney you signed 3 years ago when you went in for that appendix surgery? You said, Camilla, handle everything in case I don't wake up. That was temporary. Actually, Camilla reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. It was durable. You never revoked it. And this morning, acting as your financial proxy, I flagged some suspicious activity on your accounts. Specifically, large transfers to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Blue Horizon Assets. Darian's face went the color of ash. You froze the accounts. Better. Camilla leaned in. I authorized the transfer. You see, I agreed with you. Blue Horizon Assets seemed like a great place to store money. So I helped you move all of it. The joint savings, the liquid stock portfolio, the emergency fund. You moved my money to the Caymans. Darian was confused. But that's my account. I control Blue Horizon. Do you? Camilla raised an eyebrow. Because I did a little digging. Blue Horizon was set up by your CFO, Marcus, and Marcus has been very cooperative since I showed him the evidence of his embezzlement last week. He signed over control of Blue Horizon to a new beneficiary this morning. Darian stopped breathing. Who? Me, Camilla whispered. It's in a trust for the baby. Irrevocable. You can't touch it. I can't touch it. It's gone, Darian. You're not just frozen. You're broke. The word hung in the air. Broke. Selina let out a small gasp. She looked at Darian with sudden horror, not because he was a cheater, but because he was suddenly a liability. Dar, Selina whispered, is this true? Do you not have the money for the apartment? Selina, shut up! Darian screamed. Don't speak to her like that, Camilla chided. She's a victim here too. She thought she was sleeping with a billionaire. Turns out she's sleeping with a man who can't even pay for his own escargot. Camilla stood up. She smoothed her dress over her belly. Laurent, Camilla said, pulling out her own credit card, a modest gold card from her personal account. Put the bill on this, but only for my meal, and the bread. I'm not paying for the wine, or the truffles, or the company. Of course, madame, Laurent said, taking her card with reverence. Wait. Selina stood up. You're leaving us with the bill. Consider it an investment in your education, sweetie, Camilla said, picking up her clutch. You learned a valuable lesson tonight. Always check the bank statements before you wreck the home. Camilla looked at Darian one last time. He looked small, defeated, a king stripped of his crown in the middle of a French restaurant. "I'll see you in court, Darian," Camilla said. "Hobbs is waiting outside to drive me home. You can take the subway, if you can afford the fare." She turned and walked away. The entire restaurant watched her go. Someone, somewhere in the back, started a slow clap. But the story wasn't over, because as Camilla walked out into the rain, feeling the rush of victory, she didn't know that Darian Hayes had one last card to play. A card that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the baby she was carrying. Darian slumped into his chair, watching his wife leave. He looked at the unpaid bill. He looked at Selena, who was already texting her agent. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a burner phone, the one Camilla didn't know about. He dialed a number. "It's me," Darian said, his voice cold and dead. "Plan B. Initiate the custody protocol. She's unstable. I want her committed before the baby is born." The victory at Lobsidian tasted sweet, but it had a bitter aftertaste that Camilla couldn't shake. As Hobbs drove the Escalade through the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan, Camilla felt a tremor in her hands. She had humiliated Darian. She had frozen his assets. But she knew him. A wounded animal is dangerous. A wounded narcissist is lethal. The attack came at 6 a.m. the next morning. Camilla was in the kitchen of the penthouse making herbal tea. The baby was restless. The intercom buzzed. "Mrs. Hayes," the doorman's voice was anxious. "There are police here, and a social worker." Camilla's blood ran cold. "Send them up." She didn't change out of her silk robe. She walked to the door, her hand instinctively protecting her belly. When the elevator doors opened, 2 uniformed officers stepped out, followed by a woman in a beige suit holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Camilla Hayes?" the woman asked. She had the tired, efficient look of a bureaucrat. "I'm Janice Thorne, Child Protective Services. We received an emergency report regarding the welfare of your unborn child and your current mental state." "My mental state?" Camilla laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "I'm 8 months pregnant and drinking chamomile tea. Who made this report?" "Your husband, Darian Hayes," Janice said, stepping into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. "He claims you have been exhibiting erratic behavior threatening self-harm and jeopardizing the pregnancy. He has filed for an emergency psychiatric hold." "That is a lie," Camilla said, her voice shaking with rage. "He's doing this because I caught him with his mistress last night and froze his accounts." "We have an affidavit here from a doctor, Aris Thorne." The social worker continued ignoring Camilla's defense. "A psychiatrist who claims he has been treating you for postpartum psychosis. Prepartum, in this case." Camilla stared at the paper. "I have never met a Dr. Thorne in my life. He has your patient file, Mrs. Hayes. Detailed notes on your hallucinations and violent outbursts." Camilla realized then how deep the rot went. Darian hadn't just been cheating, he had been building a trap for months. He had paid off a doctor to fabricate a medical history. If they took her now, if they institutionalized her, he would get power of attorney over her person, not just the finances. He would control the birth. He would take the baby. "You need to come with us, ma'am," the officer said, stepping forward. "Just for an evaluation." "No." Camilla backed away. "I'm calling my lawyer. You can call from the hospital." The officer reached for her arm. "Don't touch me," Camilla screamed. The stress hit her like a physical blow. A sharp, tearing pain ripped through her abdomen. It wasn't a contraction. It was continuous. The room spun. "My water," Camilla gasped, looking down. But it wasn't water. It was blood. The officer froze. "Ma'am, I'm bleeding," Camilla whispered. Her knees gave out. The social worker dropped her clipboard. "Call an ambulance, now." As the world faded into grey static, Camilla saw Darian walking out of the elevator. He was wearing a fresh suit. He looked concerned, performatively concerned. "Camilla," he shouted, rushing over. "Oh my God! What did she do? I told you she was unstable." He leaned close to her ear as the paramedics arrived. His voice was a whisper meant only for her. "Checkmate, darling. You get the psych ward. I get the kid, and the trust fund." Camilla tried to speak, tried to scream, but the darkness swallowed her whole. The return to consciousness was not a sudden awakening, but a slow, agonizing crawl through thick grey mud. There was no light at first, only sound. The rhythmic, mechanical hiss, click, beep of a machine. The low hum of industrial air conditioning. The squeak of rubber soles on linoleum. Camilla tried to take a deep breath, but her body rebelled. A sharp, searing line of fire tore across her lower abdomen. Feeling less like an incision and more like she had been cut in half. She gasped, the sound dry and scraping in her throat. "Easy, Mrs. Hayes. Easy." A hand, cool and professional, touched her forehead. Camilla forced her eyes open. The world was a blur of aggressive, fluorescent white. As her vision sharpened, she made out the face of a nurse, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a stethoscope around her neck. Memory rushed back in a violent tide. The apartment, the police, the blood on the floor, the whisper in her ear. "Checkmate, darling." Adrenaline surged through her, overriding the anesthesia. Camilla tried to sit up, her hands scrabbling at the sheets, panic clawing at her throat. "My baby," she choked out. "Where is he? Where is my son?" "He is safe, honey. He is safe," the nurse soothed, gently pushing Camilla's shoulders back down. "You had an emergency C-section. You lost a lot of blood. You need to lie still." "Darian," Camilla hissed the name, tasting like bile. "My husband. He's trying to take him. He has a paper, a fake paper. You can't let him in. Please, you can't let him take the baby." The nurse exchanged a look with someone standing in the shadows of the doorway. Camilla followed her gaze. Her heart hammered against her ribs. If it was Darian, if he was standing there with that smug, victorious smile, she would find a way to kill him, even if she had to crawl out of this bed to do it. But it wasn't Darian. Stepping into the light was a figure cut from granite and expensive wool, Adrian Penhaligon. He was 70 years old, wearing a charcoal three-piece suit that hadn't wrinkled despite the late hour. He leaned on a cane, topped with a silver lion's head. He was the managing partner of Penhaligon and Cross, the most ruthless divorce firm in Manhattan. But more importantly, he was the man who had held Camilla's hand at her father's funeral. "Adrian," Camilla whispered, tears finally spilling over. "He won. He trapped me." Adrian walked to the bedside, his movements slow and deliberate. He placed his hand over hers. His skin was dry and papery, but his grip was iron. "Camilla," he said, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated in the sterile room. "Darian Hayes has won nothing but a prolonged stay in a federal facility. You are safe, the boy is safe. But the psychiatric hold, the police, drink this, Adrian commanded gently, lifting a cup of ice chips to her lips. Then I will tell you exactly how the last 48 hours have dismantled your husband's life. Camilla chewed on the ice, the cold numbness spreading through her mouth. She watched Adrian pull a chair close to the bed. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright with the predatory gleam of a lawyer who had just feasted. When you collapsed, Adrian began. Darian played his part to perfection. He rode in the ambulance. He wept in the waiting room. He told every nurse and doctor who would listen that his wife had suffered a psychotic break and had tried to harm the child. He produced the affidavit from Dr. Thorne. He demanded immediate custody of the infant the moment he was extracted. Camilla closed her eyes, shivering. He planned it perfectly. Almost perfectly, Adrian corrected. He made one fatal error. He assumed that because you were unconscious, you were defenseless. He forgot that you are a Vanderbilt. And he forgot that I am still breathing. Adrian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black digital recorder. Hobbs called me from the lobby before the ambulance even left the building. He told me everything. By the time I arrived at the hospital, Darian was already in a private meeting with the hospital administrator and a judge he had requested for an emergency ex parte hearing to strip you of custody. He moved that fast. He had to. He knew once you woke up you would fight. He wanted the legal order signed while you were under the knife. Adrian smiled grimly. I walked into that hearing room just as Darian was handing the judge the psychiatric file. You should have seen his face, Camilla. It looked like he had swallowed a live coal. What did you do? I asked the judge for a 5-minute recess to review new evidence. Darian objected, of course. He shouted about the imminent danger to the child, but the judge granted it. Adrian pressed a button on the recorder. The room filled with static, then the sound of a car engine, and finally, voices. It was the recording from the previous night in the Escalade. Camilla heard her own voice, cold and sharp, dissecting Darian's finances. Then she heard Darian's panicked, angry retorts. I'll have the health inspector here by dessert. You can't kick me out of my own house. Adrian stopped the tape. That established motive. It proved that you were lucid, rational, and engaged in a financial dispute, not a psychotic episode. It proved his concern was actually retaliation for you cutting off his money. But that wasn't enough to prove the fraud. For that, we needed the cherry on top. Adrian tapped his cane on the floor. The intercom. The intercom? Camilla asked, confused. The entry system in your penthouse. You had it upgraded last year. Remember, the new security protocol buffers audio for 60 seconds before and after activation to prevent buzzing in unauthorized guests. When Darian buzzed the doorman to let the police up, the system was recording. Adrian pulled out his phone this time. He tapped the screen. The audio was crystal clear. It was the sound of the elevator doors opening in the penthouse foyer, the sound of Camilla gasping in pain, the chaos of the paramedics, and then the silence as Darian leaned in close. Checkmate, darling. You get the psych ward. I get the kid. And the trust fund. The voice echoed in the hospital room, chilling Camilla to the bone. Hearing it again stripped away the confusion of the trauma. It was pure distilled malice. The judge heard that, Adrian said softly, and he turned a shade of purple I have rarely seen in a courtroom. He didn't just deny Darian's custody petition, Camilla. He issued a bench warrant for his immediate arrest. Where is he? Camilla asked. Is he gone? Oh, the arrest was quite the spectacle. Adrian chuckled darkly. Darian was in the surgical waiting room. He was giving an interview to a reporter from the Post, telling them about your tragic mental decline. He was crying. Actual tears. He's a better actor than I gave him credit for. Adrian leaned back, savoring the memory. Detective Brannigan, you remember him from the gala last year, walked in with 4 uniformed officers. Darian stood up, thinking they were there to give him the custody papers. He actually held out his hand. Brannigan didn't shake it. Brannigan slapped the cuffs on him so hard, Darian fell back into the plastic chairs. He was charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, filing a false police report, perjury, and insurance fraud. And thanks to the financial documents you secured before dinner, wire fraud and embezzlement. And the doctor, Camilla asked. Dr. Thorne. Picked up at JFK trying to board a flight to Athens, Adrian said. He flipped on Darian in under an hour, admitted he took $50,000 to forge the patient history. He's currently negotiating a plea deal that involves testifying against your husband. Camilla let out a long, shuddering breath. The weight that had been pressing on her chest for months, the fear, the suspicion, the need to be constantly vigilant, evaporated. It's over, she whispered. Not quite, Adrian said. There is the matter of Miss Valenti. Camilla stiffened. Selina. She was detained at the airport as well. Attempted flight. However, Adrian paused, examining his fingernails. She proved to be quite useful. Once she realized Darian's credit cards were useless and he was facing prison time, her loyalty evaporated. She provided the district attorney with access to Darian's burner phone, the one he used to coordinate with the doctor. She had the passcode. Apparently he used her birthday. How cliché. So she walks free. She avoids jail, Adrian corrected. But her career is dead. The scandal is already trending. The mistress who helped steal a baby. Gucci dropped her this morning. Her agency terminated her contract at noon. She's currently trying to sell her story to the tabloids for rent money, but I have an injunction ready to stop her from mentioning your name or the child's name in perpetuity. Camilla looked down at her hands. They were pale, trembling slightly. She had won. It was a total scorched earth victory. But it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like survival. I need to see him, Adrian, she said. I need to see my son. I thought you might say that. Adrian stood up and walked to the door. He opened it and signaled to someone in the hall. A nurse wheeled in a clear, high-tech bassinet. It was humming softly. Camilla felt the tears come again, hot and fast. She reached out, ignoring the pain in her incision. The nurse lowered the side of the bassinet. He was so small. That was Camilla's first thought. He was impossibly small, wrapped in a generic hospital blanket that looked 3 sizes too big. He had a mess of dark hair and a tiny, pouty mouth that looked exactly like hers. He was hooked up to a monitor, a small sensor taped to his foot, the red light glowing softly. He's perfect, the nurse said softly. 4 pounds 6 ounces. Lungs are a bit undeveloped, so he needs the oxygen for a few days. But he's strong. He was kicking the incubator all night. Camilla brushed her finger against the baby's cheek. His skin was impossibly soft, warm, and alive. He stirred at her touch, his face scrunching up in a grimace before he let out a small, squeaky yawn. He doesn't have a name yet, the nurse noted, glancing at the chart. The father, Mr. Hayes, he filled out a form for Darian Hayes, Jr., but the lawyer had it shredded. His name isn't Darian, Camilla said, her voice finding a new strength. She looked at the tiny, fragile human being who had been the center of a war before he even took his first breath. She looked at Adrian, who was watching her with a rare expression of tenderness. He survived the stress, Camilla whispered. He survived the betrayal. He survived the surgery. He is a fighter, Adrian agreed. Leo! Camilla said the name, settling into the air like a shield. His name is Leo, because he is going to have the heart of a lion. And he is going to be the king of his own life, not a pawn in someone else's. Leo Hayes. Adrian tested the name. It has a ring to it. No. Camilla corrected him. She looked down at her son, her eyes hardening. Not Hayes. That name dies with Darian's reputation. She looked up at Adrian. My mother's name, Vanderbilt, or my father's name, anything but Hayes. We can file a petition for a name change with the divorce decree. Adrian nodded. Leo Vanderbilt. It sounds expensive. Camilla laughed, a weak, watery sound. But it was real. She leaned her head back against the pillow, keeping her hand on her son's chest, feeling the steady, rhythmic beat of his heart. The rain outside had stopped. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, golden shadows across the room. The nightmare was over. The golden cage was broken. Adrian. Yes, my dear. When Darian calls, and I know he will call from jail, tell him I'm not accepting collect calls. Adrian Penhaligon smiled, a genuine, crinkly-eyed smile. I will convey the message with pleasure. Camilla closed her eyes, listening to the breathing of her son. For the first time in 9 months, she didn't have to look over her shoulder. She didn't have to check a tracking app. She didn't have to worry about the scent of another woman's perfume. She was just a mother. And for now, that was the only title that mattered. So the Hayes Empire didn't fall to a stock market crash or a hostile takeover. It fell because one man underestimated the woman he vowed to protect. Darian Hayes is currently serving consecutive sentences in federal prison. Camilla and Leo legally changed their names and moved to Paris, leaving the toxicity of New York behind forever. It's a chilling reminder that the most dangerous person in the room isn't always the one shouting. It's the one listening, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. If this story of high-stakes revenge kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit the like button. It helps the algorithm find more people who love justice. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a story. I'll see you in the next video.